Hello and welcome to episode 50 of the official EstablishedRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the co-founders here at ETR. I remain quarantined in my home with a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, but I am happy to report I haven't murdered any of them yet, and it's a 2-pod week. Yes, there is so much going on in the NFL that Evan and I decided we needed to jump back on here after just a couple of days. We recorded episode 49 just about 48 hours ago, but so much going on. Figured we'd jump back on here, say what's up, go through some more of the news. Evan, free agency week is getting closer to the end. It is Thursday at 2:45 p.m. What's going on?
What's going on? Yeah, it's starting to slow down a little bit. From a non-football perspective, last night I stayed up late and watched Contagion, and I'm not saying that to be funny or insensitive, but if you want to give yourself motivation to socially distance, that will supply you with motivation. They actually use the term social distancing, and that's from 2011. I actually wasn't even familiar necessarily with that term until, the past few weeks, but they use that term in that movie. I'm not trying to freak anybody out, but, if you need some motivation to socially distance, and it seems like some people still do need that, I would suggest watching that movie.
Yeah. Contagion is very good. Outbreak is also very good. Regardless of what's going on right now, still very good movies. Anyways, a couple of business items real quick. Want to remind everyone that everything on Established Run right now is free. Evan is blurbing every single NFL transaction, his tracker article. I just published my free agency fantasy winners. Karain has his deep league risers and his dynasty rankings. Those rankings, Evan's initial top 150 is up for free. He'll update that once all this madness of free agency settles down. Also want to let everyone know that producer Luke is crushing in the YouTube game right now. All these podcasts are going up on YouTube. If you can bear to look at us, real graphics, video, almost looks like we are professionals. So hope you all head to establishedrun.com. Check it all out. Okay, let's get to the latest news. And soon after we ended last pod, we speculated about it last pod, but I want to go deeper on it now. Tom Brady, shockingly, surprisingly, oddly, is going to be playing for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers next season. And I think Evan and I have a little bit of a disagreement here. He thinks, I think, and Evan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he thinks Chris Godwin is going to be okay. And I hope that's true. I just have concerns that we won't see the extreme styles that Ryan Fitzpatrick and Jamies Winston had over the last couple of years that have led to so much pass game success for the Bucs. Jameis Winston last year, second in average depth of target. Tom Brady was 26. And I understand personnel had a lot to do with that. Ryan Fitzpatrick, though, led the league in average depth of target. But it's not just that. It's like all the turnovers, all the pick sixes, all the garbage time. It all turns into these like messy shootouts. And you see these wildly huge games for Chris Godwin. And I understand that Chris Godwin's still going to play in the slot, and Julian Edelman was very productive. I'm just not sure we're ever getting from Chris Godwin 9 catches, 200 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Like, that just doesn't happen with Tom Brady. His football IQ is too high to have these huge kind of games, I think. And also, I think the Bucs defense is actually pretty good. They have a lot of talent, and they were, over the last half of last year, they were one of the best in the league. So obviously, I think Mike Evans takes a big hit. I think we disagree a little bit on how much of a hit, if at all, Chris Godwin takes. But give me your Tom Brady takes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Chris Godwin's floor is going to be really safe still. But, yeah, 95.2 yards per game. He only played 14 games, and he had over 1,300 yards. Probably not getting back to that. I do think that his touchdown total can still be high, and I think he's going to have a really safe floor. And I think Mike Evans is going to be a little bit more inconsistent. But, yeah, just talking about Brady, I think that he gets a really nice bump here, mainly from the weapon standpoint. I think the Bucs can still add to his arsenal. They have enough cap space left. Tom Brady is going to want veteran players around him. He's going to want guys that he trusts. If you listen to Mike Lombardi's podcast, he obviously has a longstanding relationship with Brady and with the Patriots organization. One of the things that the Patriots clashed with or Belichick clashed with Brady about late in his career was with New England was that he wanted more veteran players around him. That's one of the reasons that they went out and got Mohamed Sanu, who obviously did not work out for them. Mm-hmm. But he wanted guys that he could trust. And I think he's going to be able to trust Godwin. And I think he's going to be able to trust Mike Evans up in the air whether or not he's going to be able to trust O.J. Howard. And then I think he's going to want a running back that he can trust. And I think that Melvin Gordon would be a really interesting fit there. I think that Dion Lewis would obviously be cheaper, and he is a free agent after being released by Tennessee. But Brady has been under 30 touchdown passes 3 of the last 4 seasons. You know, the Patriots' weapons really became depleted over the last 2 years. Rob Gronkowski fell off in 2018, wasn't there in 2019. And I'm totally with you that you can't expect the Bucs to be a freewheeling, high-flying offense like they were with Jameis Winston. And they have a really talented defense. I mean, they went out of their way to, retain Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul. They have, an extremely athletic linebacker core with Devin White returning in his second year, Levante David. And they've got a lot of young, promising players in the secondary. But, yeah, I mean, Jameis Winston threw 6 or 7 pick sixes last year, and the over/under on pick sixes for Tom Brady this year would probably be like 1.5.
Right, and pick sixes are just gold for quarterbacks and wide receivers. I mean, and there's just so much of that. So I think it's interesting. Where would you slot Brady in now? Do you think Brady is a starter in season-long leagues for people? I kind of don't, but I can see the case for it. It's really controversial whether you think Brady can be a starter for people in season-long leagues.
I think that he's going to end up in the 12 to 16 range in my rankings. I have not, resorted everything, which I'm going to do after free agency slows down. But that's where I anticipate him landing, in the 12 to 16 range among quarterbacks. So that's not necessarily, an every week fantasy starter. It's actually definitely not an every week fantasy starter.
I want to talk about New England quickly because they seem to be the forgotten team already. And it's just laughable to me that people think like Bill Belichick in New England woke up and they were like, oh, well, Tom's gone. What are we going to do at quarterback? I'm sure they have a plan. I'm curious if you think the plan is Jarrett Stidham. Jarrett Stidham, 2019 4th-round pick. That's who is the current starter. Cody Kessler is behind him. Stidham beat out Brian Hoyer for the backup job last year, in large part because he was excellent in the preseason. 68% of his passes completed in the preseason. Actually ran for 88 yards in 4 preseason games. I could see New England maybe with Jameis Winston. I could see them with Cam Newton. I could see them with Andy Dalton. I could maybe see them with Jacoby Brissett. I certainly could see them drafting a quarterback. I'm curious what you think of Stidham and what you think the Patriots should do at quarterback. And I'll throw one more thing at you for quarterback, the Patriots. Tank for Trevor Lawrence. Just go ahead and tank it off. Try to get Trevor Lawrence.
I don't think they're tanking for Trevor Lawrence based on a lot of moves that they've made. They franchise tagged Joe Thuney. They re-signed Devin McCourty. They're not sitting back and making no moves this offseason. They've been active and Bill Belichick he's starting to get old. Does he really feel like he wants to take a full scale step back and try to compete for the number 1 overall pick in 2021? I don't really see that. But as for Jarrett Stidham, he played really well in the preseason this past year. He was a guy that he spent 2 years at Auburn. He originally started at Baylor. He transferred to a community college. He spent 2 years at Auburn. He was great his first season there, and he was seen as a guy that could potentially be the number 1 overall pick in the 2019 draft. But then he had a really rocky final season, and he fell to I think he went in the 4th round to New England. So I just, the jury is really, really out on him. And I'm sure that he'll be involved. Like if it comes down to, a situation where the guy that they get is like Andy Dalton, I think it'll be like a 1-for-1 battle. Like Andy Dalton would be the favorite, but I think that Andy Dalton and Jarrett Stidham would like have a true training camp competition in that scenario. But he is athletic and he did play well this preseason. And, I think he's still like a really major open book. It's hard to say anything definitive about him.
Yeah, I wanted to note on the New England side, I thought Pat Kerrane had a good point about N'Keal Harry. If you're in a dynasty league, if you're in super deep best ball, it was clear that Tom Brady did not feel comfortable with N'Keal Harry. N'Keal Harry remains one of the best prospects in last year's draft at the wide receiver position, and he's going to get maybe not a quarterback upgrade, but maybe someone who trusts N'Keal Harry more as he enters year 2. So I thought that was a good point by Kerrane in his article.
And I want to say one more thing, that trust factor is so critical with Tom Brady. We've seen it for years and years. like I was, I was talking about the Bucks running back situation. A bunch of Bucks fans jump in and, they say, oh, we should just draft the running back in the second or third round. That does make sense for, most teams. I mean, that's how most teams should approach the running back position. But Tom Brady is going to want guys around him that he trusts to pass block, that he trusts to be in the right spot. And so I think that we're going to see that. And then Schefter had a report today. We're recording this on Thursday.
Yeah. And
Schefter reported that some veterans have reached out to the Buccaneers saying that, hey, we'll take a little bit less money to go play with Tom Brady. We want to come to the Buccaneers. And I think that makes a ton of sense. So I think there's going to be a common ground situation where the Bucs are going to be able to kind of have their pick of the litter, especially in this like second or third wave of free agency.
Yeah. It's like the LeBron thing with free agents wanting to play with LeBron. The funniest thing when I tweeted about Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and how I was worried about them and why. And like, I got like 20 responses of people sending me like Brady to Randy Moss highlights. I'm like, guys, that was 13 years ago. 13. I'm not exaggerating. They're sending me 2007 highlights of Brady to Moss. Okay, let's move on. Tyrod Taylor, artist formerly known as Ty God. I was one of the biggest Tyrod Taylor supporters when he was battling to win the job in Buffalo. Ended up winning it. Was not heavily owned. This was like 2015, I think. And people were just slow to move on running quarterbacks. And he was very underowned in daily fantasy and underdrafted in season long. I mean, Tyrod Taylor. And by the way, the reason we're talking about this is because Philip Rivers obviously signed with the Colts, which we talked about last time. And surprisingly, reports out of LA say that the Chargers are not going to add a veteran, that they're going to have Tyrod and they'll probably draft someone. So Tyrod, I think, has a pretty good chance to start week one. But anyways, in Tyrod's career, 0.56 rushing yards per snap. I mean, that's a lot. That, projects out to somewhere between 30 and 40 rushing yards per game. He also has Keenan Allen. He has Big Mike Williams. He has Hunter Henry. He has Austin Eckler. So you combine that rushing ability with really good weaponry for the Chargers. I think Tyrod is looking up. Like, I would consider Tyrod over Tom Brady, right, if I was drafting right now, although Tyrod's job security is probably way worse. So for season long, that's probably not sharp. But what do you think about Tyrod with all these weapons in his legs?
So I definitely think the Chargers are going to take a quarterback early in the draft. And, they have the number 6 overall pick. They could probably even move up a couple of spots. But I don't think that quarterback is going to be ready because there's going to be no offseason workouts. Training camp could be delayed. We might lose a preseason game. Like, that quarterback is not going to be in any real position to, play in place of Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor is going to have just a massive leg up on this guy. The Chargers are bringing back, obviously, Anthony Lynn, their head coach, who, by the way, was with Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo. And they're bringing back their OC, Shane Steichen, who took over for Ken Wisenhunt a few games into last season. And so he has familiarity. He was their quarterback's coach. He has familiarity with Tyrod Taylor from last year. So I think it's very likely, like almost a lock, that Tyrod Taylor opens the 2020 season as the Charger starter. Maybe he plays his way out of that position, but he's going to be set up to succeed. Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, maybe the best receiving back in the league. Trey Turner and Brian Bulaga, who they solidified the right side of their offensive line. That was a huge weakness for them last season. I think I'm worried about the fantasy values of all those guys, Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, and Eckler. But I would not be worried about the fantasy value of Tyrod Taylor right now. I think that he's probably available on some Dynasty League waiver wires even. He's a guy to pick up for sure, and that we could definitely be looking at in daily fantasy early in the season.
Yeah, I have concerns for Eckler. I thought if Tom Brady would have gone to the Chargers, you could consider Austin Eckler maybe in the first round of season-long drafts. With Tyrod Taylor now the quarterback for the Chargers, I could see bumping Eckler down to like the third round. I mean, Tyrod Taylor is not someone who's just going to touch pass it off to his running backs a ton. He's going to tuck it and run. Goal line is going to be less opportunities. Tyrod Taylor is going to be running down there. So, yeah, I think Austin Eckler deserves to be bumped down. I don't have here where you had him in your initial top 150, but if you had him high, I assume Austin Eckler's got to come down a little bit, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. I think he was RB11 or RB12 and like a top 25 pick. And now he is, I don't know, he's going to fall.
Okay. An interesting signing, I think, for the Bears. We knew the Bears wanted to add, or trade, I'm sorry, for the Bears. We knew the Bears wanted to add competition for Mitchell Trubisky. And they added an interesting one, Big Dick Nick Foles. Nick Foles, similar to Mitchell Trubisky, has shown a ceiling at times. I mean, I remember a game Nick Foles had, I think in 2018. He had like a 400-yard, 4-touchdown game in 2018 with the Eagles. That playoff run in 2017 when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I mean, he absolutely lit up Minnesota in the conference championship game, lit up the Patriots in the Super Bowl. So I'm curious what you think the chances are Big Dick Nick can beat out Mitchell Trubisky, and will this move force you to adjust Allen Robinson in the rankings at all? Shout out to Penn State.
Yeah, Nick Foles has been an extremely volatile quarterback over the course of his career. I mean, we can go back to 2013. He was like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. You know, he had 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions under Chip Kelly. He was terrible with the Rams.
Jeff Fisher Rams, though. I give everybody a pass for Jeff Fisher.
Yeah. You know, he wasn't good when he played last year for the Jaguars.
Yeah.
He – even in that Super Bowl run, you remember the first couple of games that he played, he was awful.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he just, you know, caught fire. I mean, he's like such a boomer bust player. You know, and he's been that throughout his career. I think the first guy you look at is Allen Robinson from his pass catcher core. Allen Robinson has been getting it done with terrible quarterbacks throughout the entirety of his football playing career, going back to college.
Mm-hmm.
He, you know, made people think that Christian Hackenberg would be a first-round pick, made, you know, an actual NFL team believe that Christian Hackenberg was worth a second-round pick. He made Blake Bortles into a stud. He has made, you know, Mitchell Trubisky look competent at times this past year and the year before. And I think, and if you look at the connection that Nick Foles had with Alshon Jeffrey, that was his dude. I think that Allen Robinson is like a rich man's Alshon Jeffrey. He can do everything that Alshon can do and more. I think that Nick Foles is definitely going to start over Mitchell Trubisky. And this is not a situation where, you know, the incoming quarterback has to learn a bunch of new things, because this coaching staff in Chicago is like built to support Nick Foles. Matt Nagy was with Nick Foles in Kansas City. The new Bears OC, Bill Lazor, was his quarterback's coach during that 2013 season under Chip Kelly when Nick Foles had 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. John DeFilippo, the new Bears quarterback's coach, was Foles' quarterback's coach when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and he was the Jaguars OC last year, and he had a huge hand in convincing the Jaguars that Nick Foles was worth signing for 4 years and $88 million. So, I mean, Nick Foles is going to know this offense, you know, just jump, and he'll be able to jump right in. And I mean, I think today he probably knows the offense better than does even Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm sure this is going to be framed as a competition between Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky. I'm sure that's the way it'll be framed. So we'll see on that. But yeah, I'm optimistic about Allen Robinson. As you mentioned, he's been doing it with bad quarterbacks, and dude is just so talented. Let's move to a couple of defensive moves. We didn't talk a lot about defense last time, but there were some impactful ones for fantasy, I thought, over the last couple of days. First one being Darius Slay. I mean, the Eagles have been in search of improved cornerback play for, God, I don't even know how long, since they blew their load on Nnamdi Asomugha. I don't even know how long ago that was, during the Chip Kelly era. They gave up a 3rd-round pick and a 5th-round pick for the right to pay Darius Slay $50 million on a 3-year contract extension. Now, they also added Javon Hargrave, who I think you like, who I'm pretty sure you like. And I thought when they added Javon Hargrave earlier in the week, I was like, man, they're going to be this massive funnel again where they just have no talent in the secondary. All the talent is up front. But now they've added Slay, it can make a big difference. Darius Slay can go into the slot. Darius Slay can shadow. I think he's one of the better corners in the league. It didn't help the Lions secondary a ton, but he still individually is very, very good. So I'm curious if you think that the Eagles secondary is legit improved now. One, we won't just be able to play quarterbacks and wide receivers against blindly.
Well, I think that it is improved, but I think that teams are just going to throw the ball to the other spots. I think they can still be a major pass funnel. No one's going to run on them. Javon Hargrave is going to be unleashed, and I think, you know, have a monster year next to Fletcher Cox. He was really like a 3-4 gapping player, nose tackle in Pittsburgh, and now they're going to let him get upfield, and I think he's going to be an absolute menace. They're getting back Malik Jackson. He'll be their nickel pass rusher on the inside. Darius Slay can only cover one side of the field. And the Eagles are not strong at slot or number 2 cornerback. They cut Malcolm Jenkins, who had a good season for them. And they might have to start Jalen Mills at safety. Jalen Mills converting from cornerback. They also cut Nigel Bradham, who was a really good pass coverage linebacker. So I think they still have major concerns in pass coverage. I think this was a needed move, but I don't think it's like, there's 5 players in the secondary, and, there's typically 2 linebackers on the field, and all those guys got to cover, and they don't have, very many guys right now who can cover outside of Darius Slay.
Yeah, for sure. And the Eagles front, it's going to be really hard to run on them. But as Evan said, similar to where the Lions secondary was one I was never really afraid to play players against, even though I had respect for Darius Slay. It's just he can't do it all. So we'll see what else the Eagles do. They desperately need some wide receiver help. So I'm sure that'll be where their focus, that should be where their focus is in the draft and wherever is left in free agency, which we'll get to in a minute. Robbie Anderson's still out there. Emmanuel Sanders still out there as of Thursday at 3 p.m. Okay, let's talk about this Chargers defense, man. I know I've said this before, and injuries have hurt them. And but God, from a talent perspective, the Chargers defense is absolutely loaded. They added Chris Harris, and now I think they have 3 of the game's best cornerbacks: Casey Hayward, Desmond King in the slot, and Chris Harris. And then they also have Joey Bosa and Melvin Ingram off the edge. They have Linval Joseph at defensive tackle. They have Derwin James at safety. And it hasn't all come together for this defense due to injury or inconsistency or whatever. But on paper, this has to be one of, if not the most talented defenses in the league. I think the Broncos are really talented. There's some other defenses that are really talented. But adding Chris Harris to this, they're nasty. How good do you think this Chargers defense can be now that they have Chris Harris?
Yeah, and they also hit on Drew Tranquill, who I think is an ascending player. They took him in the middle rounds last year out of Notre Dame. He had a great rookie season. Their first and second round picks last year were used on defense. Jerry Tillery and Nasir Adderley, those guys kind of took redshirt years, and those guys could ascend in their second season. I think that they have not only an incredible first team defense, but they've also got some serious depth now. They even they gave Michael Davis, a cornerback who made a bunch of starts for them last year. They gave him a second round tender. He's their 4th cornerback. I think they should be really good. I thought that they should be really good last year, and they were fine. But I think that they need to take, with all this potential that they have, they should be able to take it and become a true top 5, top 3 defense, because their personnel is insane.
Yeah. And I thought Hayden Winks, who works at Roto World and has some experience working with the Chargers, made a good point. It's they have an amazing defense, but still, how can they beat Patrick Mahomes? No matter how good your defense is, when you start Tyrod Taylor against Patrick Mahomes, you're still a huge, huge dog. So they're going to need to figure something out at the quarterback position. And it doesn't mean that their defense is so good they're going to be able to stop Patrick Mahomes. I just think on paper, God, so much talent. Okay. Want to do one more, actually a few more here, but I wanted to mention one other guy from Pat Kerrane's article, Allen Lazard, who quietly got another 1-year deal from the Packers. And Packers have not done much. They've been extremely quiet. They missed on Austin Hooper. I haven't heard them really linked to Robbie Anderson at all. Maybe that's coming. But Pat pointed out that Allen Lazard last year was actually good. He was better than Preston Williams, better than Darius Slayton in yards per route run among rookie wide receivers. Similar ADOT, similar racer metrics to Will Fuller, excellent athleticism. So as things are kind of trending right now, it's early, but Allen Lazard at least has a chance. And we've heard rumblings that Aaron Rodgers actually likes Allen Lazard, which we know means a lot from the whole Jeff Janis experience. So if I was playing Dynasty, Allen Lazard would be somebody I could definitely target right now. What do you think about him? And do you think the Packers are still in on Robbie Anderson?
Yeah, I do think that Lazard is still a little risky because of the Robbie Anderson potential. And Robbie Anderson's price tag is probably falling because he was not signed on the first 2 or 3 days of free agency. So he might become a lot more reasonable for teams that weren't previously considering him due to his contract demands. And I also think the Packers could be in the mix for one of these great wide receivers coming out in the draft. Mm-hmm. But, man, I'll just leave it at that. This article by Pat Kerrane for Dynasty Buys is excellent. I read it. I was really, really impressed. I would just suggest that everybody go read it because it's awesome. It's really, really evidence based, and it's a great read.
Okay, two more running back, smaller signs I want to hit on. The Dolphins, which I hated to see because I think the Dolphins are on the right path and I want them to give kind of young, exciting players more chances. But they did sign Jordan Howard to a 2-year deal. I don't think that the book is closed there. They're going to draft a running back, and I'm sure he'll share time. Jordan Howard blocked Miles Sanders for much of last year, and I'm sure Jordan Howard will again block whatever running back they draft. Curious what you think of that move by the Dolphins. And also, I don't think it changes our opinion on Miles Sanders. We expected Jordan Howard to be gone. I think it's going to be Miles Sanders and Boston Scott, the most likely duo for the Eagles in the backfield now.
Yeah, that'd be a great situation for fantasy. And I think that Boston Scott could, as he kind of showed down the stretch, he could be a factor too, as like, a flex option or, if Miles Sanders were to get hurt, like Boston Scott can play. And then Miles Sanders, he's going to be flirting with like, I think he's going to be flirting with like a top 15 overall pick entering the fantasy draft season. But yeah, Jordan Howard, he's just a role player, 2 down, early down banger. And I don't think we're going to get a whole lot out of him, but it is kind of frustrating because he's probably going to end up blocking someone in Miami, which I think I agree with you is a team on the rise.
I didn't want to talk about this guy. Evan insisted because he's sick and twisted, but Evan wanted everybody to know that J.D. Mckissack has signed with the Redskins. Why did you need everybody to know that J.D. Mckissack has signed with the Redskins?
He's going to play. He's going to play snaps. He's going to, hurt the fantasy value of Adrian Peterson. The Adrian Peterson who has not lost a step, and Darius Geis, and he's going to play on passing downs. He's going to be the new Chris Thompson, and it also ensures that Chris Thompson is not going to be back in Washington. Chris Thompson, we know he has really struggled to stay healthy, but I think that if he gets into the right spot, he could be like a deep PPR sleeper this year.
Yeah, I've actually been carrying Chris Thompson on that RotoPat dynasty team just out of stone desperation. I do think out of the XFL, though, if you wanted Chris Thompson, I think Lance Dunbar can give you a lot of what Chris Thompson can give you, and similar players, I think. Okay, so there's some rumors out there I want to talk about. Where will Jameis Winston go? I think it's an interesting question. Jameis Winston obviously displaced in Tampa by Tom Brady. This dude threw for 5,000 yards while like half blind last year. Then he goes out and he gets LASIK surgery. Maybe now he can see. He won't throw 30 interceptions. I don't know if he's Bill Belichick's kind of quarterback, but he at least has upside. Like out of all these quarterbacks, veteran quarterbacks that are out there, at least Jameis Winston is capable of breaking off like 400 yards in a game, carrying you to a win. We know he's going to make mistakes, but maybe the right coaching staff can corral that a little bit. Where would you like to see Jameis Winston land?
Yeah, it's really tough to peg him anywhere right now. Unless like New England is willing to just totally turn over, everything that they've believed under Bill Belichick. Like he doesn't fit there, from a philosophical standpoint. I went back and looked at like who was in the front office and the coaching staff when the Bucs drafted Jameis Winston. Obviously, Jason Light, who was still their GM and has survived just so many abominable draft picks over the years, like Roberto Aguayo. He was the GM at the time. I don't think that Jameis Winston is going to go back to Tampa Bay. Dirk Cutter was the coach then. He is now in Atlanta as the Falcons OC. Could Jameis Winston end up as a backup to Matt Ryan? I think that kind of makes some sense. Mm-hmm. But it's clear that – and then John Robinson was on the Tampa Bay staff that year, and he is now in Tennessee. Could Jameis Winston end up as a backup to Ryan Tannehill? I think that could make some sense. But Jameis Winston is also like a threatening figure to some extent. And do you want to bring that in behind your established starter, certainly one that you just paid a ton of money to in Tannehill? Matt Ryan, the Falcons gave him a big extension the previous year. So it's really tough to find a fit for Jameis Winston right now. But what's I think is pretty clear right now is that he's going to be getting like a high-end backup deal.
Right. Yeah. Go from fantasies like God, Jameis, the Bucs guys had to be the most owned players in DFS last year over the course of the year. To go from that and throw for 5,000 yards to like a backup in Oakland or something like that would be kind of embarrassing. Okay, by the time this podcast, like 24 hours from now, I assume we're going to have movement on Todd Gurley. There's a lot of smoke. Gary Klein from the LA Times wrote an article about what's going on with Todd Gurley. It seems like the Rams might actually be willing to eat a $17 million cap hit, $20 million in dead money to get rid of Todd Gurley. If they do so, they'd save 10 million over the next couple of years. So it would be kind of more of a long-term thing. But man, they are in such a mess. I mean, the funny thing is they didn't even have to do this deal with Gurley. Todd Gurley had 2 years left on his deal when they extended him and gave him 45 million in guarantees. And now they have Cooks and Goff and Donald on big deals. They have Kupp and Woods and Jalen Ramsey coming up. They're going to need new deals. I mean, this is like the worst cap team in the entire NFL. But more to the fantasy point, it looks like Gurley's either going to be traded, which would surprise me, or cut by Friday. What do you think about that? And do you think that anybody behind Todd Gurley is somebody we should be moving up in anticipation of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I know that Darrell Henderson did not make an impact in his first season. The Rams really just went forward with using Todd Gurley as, their clear-cut lead back early in the season. And then as the season progressed, they progressed him into being a true workhorse and every down back in the second half. And so Darrell Henderson was a disappointment. But this is a guy who they traded up for in the 2019 draft. Was one of the most efficient running backs in the history of college football. And I think that he is a buy low right now. They have so many holes on both sides of the ball and so little draft capital that, I think they're just going to have to go ahead with Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown and maybe John Kelly as their backfield, because it looks like they don't want anything to do with Todd Gurley anymore. And I think by the time that a lot of people listen to this, Todd Gurley is no longer going to be a Ram, whether it be via trade or release, as we've seen with David Johnson and even Nick Foles. Teams have kind of figured out, and Ryan Tannehill last offseason, teams have figured out ways to get past, like really bad contract situations and execute trades. And I think that's obviously what the Rams are hoping to be able to do, but it's also possible that they just end up being forced to release him outright.
Yeah. 20 million in dead money for Todd Gurley. Such a joke. Okay. Before we wrap up here, I just want to run through a few guys who are still out there. Melvin Gordon is still out there as of Thursday, 3:15 p.m. Heard some rumors right before we started here that he could be going to, or at least linked to, the Buffalo Bills, which would obviously be hashtag bad for Devin Singletary. Goes without saying, but also still out there. Cam Newton we mentioned, Andy Dalton we mentioned, Robbie Anderson we mentioned. When we did our free agency preview, I pegged Brashad Perriman and James Bradbury as two of my favorite sleepers in free agency. Brashad Perriman is still out there. Manny Sanders is still out there. Eric Ebron is still out there. Any comments on these guys that are still out there, Evan? A lot of these guys were, relatively high in your top 100 at least.
Yeah, I think that Robbie Anderson's price was just too high, and he's going to have to settle for something a little bit less. Brashad Perriman, I've tweeted about him. Like, people are like, "Oh, Brashad Perriman sucks." Like, Brashad Perriman has played well for an extended period. Last year in 2018 in Cleveland, and down the stretch this past year, he averaged like over 100 yards per game in the final five. He wasn't dropping passes, and he really stepped up in an opportunity. I remember like last year, the concern about him when we were playing him in DFS was like, oh, he's just going to, go back to being Brashad Perriman, but he didn't. He was legitimately really, really effective. He can run. He was a first-round pick in the NFL draft, and, he got hurt, and, he lost confidence at times, and I think he's gotten it together. And I think that he is definitely a guy worth taking a gamble on. Emmanuel Sanders is still out there as we're doing this. Newton.
I saw a rumor about Manny Sanders in Dallas, like a Randall Cobb replacement.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. It would be that offense has a chance to be really freaking good this year. They were already good last year, but I think they could be even better this season. Cam Newton is in a really tough situation because he had Liz Frank surgery in December. And, with the coronavirus preventing teams from bringing players into their facilities, he is just really in a major holding pattern right now, and could be for for several more months conceivably. So no team is trading for him right now, and the Panthers, I think, are going to have to end up just releasing him.
Ugly. Okay, that will catch you guys up on everything that's happened since episode 49. This will do it for episode 50. I'm sure there's going to be a ton more news and NFL things happening over the next 3-4 days. We will likely be back on Tuesday of next week to catch you guys up on all of that. I find the offseason of the NFL fascinating, like almost more fascinating than the games, is the team building aspect and projecting how players are going to do in new spots and stuff like that. I think that's super, super, super interesting. So we'll certainly be back next week. In the meantime, we'll be covering it all on establishedrun.com. Head over there and check it out. So for Evan, for producer Luke, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.